This is the Koss 95X from Massdrop. So let's get into it. Let's talk about the Koss ESP 95X from Massdrop. Like most electrostats, it isn't built the best, and this one in particular rattles and creaks a bit more than others due to a lack of hinges incorporated in its design. It's made out of plastic mostly and has thin metal as support, but hey, the ear cups detach from the headband for portable use and storage, so there's that. The headband seems to be wrapped in a quality leatherette, but it isn't real leather to my knowledge. The pads are a stiff velour, somewhat scratchy, and do attract dust, hair, and lint. This is why I recommend purchasing a Stax CPC-1, which is a clear plastic covering for electrostats that you place over your ear speaker stand when not in use. This helps shield your ear speakers from dust, lint, and hair, and other nasty bits that might get into and affect the driver. I should note that I did get a small hair in my left ear cup once, and it created an intermittent static or popping noise. This drove me nuts until I later removed it. But let's move on. Due to the nature of ear speakers, I don't really worry about seal with these, and neither should you. They do rest lightly and comfortably on the head. The opening of the ear cup is very large, and it should fit everyone with the driver completely surrounding one's ears. The wires at the end of each ear cup are attached, and a Y-split occurs just below one's chest. The flat cable terminates in its own proprietary square 5-pin connection type, which is annoying, because nearly every type of third-party aftermarket electrostatic Energizer does not have this form of connection. Meaning, if you want to use this with another Energizer, you'll have to spring for a converter cable, which isn't cheap. The cheapest one that I found was on eBay for around $120 US. But this headphone is part of a system, and it does come with the included E90X Energizer, which does include the proprietary connector type. The back of the E90X is rather simple, containing a connection for its external power brick and a set of RCA inputs. The front of the unit has an on and off switch, a green power indicator, the connection port for the 5-pin electrostatic cable, a 3.5mm audio input, which does take priority over the RCA inputs on the back, and a volume knob with separate left and right channel balance. The knob is kind of a pain in the ass, to be honest. The channels move independently, and there is no way to align the channels and have them move together at the same time. The only way to do this is to keep a firm grip with your fingers, which isn't exactly precise. As such, I recommend setting the E90X to sufficient volume and getting a secondary passive preamp as a go-between between your DAC and the E90X. Pictured is the O switcher from JDS Labs, which is a two-way switch for both line-level inputs and outputs, utilizing one RCA and one 3.5mm connection at both input and output locations on this unit. As a perk, JDS Labs will also grayscale etch any image that you send them on top of the unit for free. A shit sys would also work for this purpose, but it differs from the O switcher in that it only uses 3 sets of RCA connectors employed as either one input and 2 outputs or one output and 2 inputs. Alternatively, you can use a variable volume control if feeding it from a DAC amp like the new iFi Zen DAC. In terms of sound, it's airy and open. Music comes at you from all directions. You hear things in the mix that are normally recessed or in the background, especially in the mid-range. When you hear these sounds presented to you, they sound like they were always supposed to be there to start with. In terms of the bottom end, the 95X has clear, tight bass that is at times a bit laid back in general. But I will stress that I find its bass to be articulate and accurate for an electrostatic headphone. Sub-bass is rolled off, however. Decay is also not a strength for the 95X, but this is especially so in the bass region, as bass intensity increases, meaning that there is less decay in the mid-bass than in the sub-bass. Another way to look at it would be to say that the sound perceptually decays from the bottom up in general. Again, I would not expect substantial sub-bass here. Having said that, there is decent sustain to the bass that is not missing, but there is very little visceral impact or slam overall. In other words, you'll hear the low end, but you won't really feel it. The mids are forward and accurate. In fact, this whole headphone just screams clarity and accuracy to me in general. Vocals are a tad forward, but less so than an HD 650 and more so than something like an HE4XX. Treble presentation is lively and very slightly rolled off on top. These are never harsh, have air for days, and have a slight warmth to the overall sound. I can't recall hearing really any sibilance here with any of the tracks I tested. Tonally, they are almost perfect for rock music, especially metal from the 80s and early 90s. I think about bands like Van Halen and Def Leppard when I think about these. However, 80s style music in general is pretty great on the 95X. They also sound very realistic in the reproduction of live brass instruments as well. The 95X is just okay and somewhat underwhelming for rap and other genres that would require more substantial bottom end and or more lengthy decay. Imaging is accurate and detailed, and the soundstage is taller than it is wide. I would describe the general depth of the sound field as at an arm's length, and the shape of the sound field as coffin-like rather than circular to my ears. Imagine that you're standing in the trapezoidal shape of Dracula's coffin. I presume that this effect has something to do with the shape of the driver, but I'm just guessing. The 95X in general is a very open-sounding set, and it can sound a little overly open and airy at times, even to the point where some might and others have called them thin. But I think this would be selling the 95X short. I'd rather call them electric sounding with the perfect kiss of warmth. Overall, I'd say the sound is neutral and slightly warm here, rolled off at both extremes, and if pressed to do so, I'd say with some mild thinness. This is a definite recommendation at the $400 to $500 price point. It's hard to beat as an entry-level electrostat in general. I might even be so bold as to say that it sounds better than the other entry-level models of many of its competitors. Like, subscribe, and share with your friends, and I'm out.